about what is the, quote, democratic approach, small d, democratic approach. One is absolutely essential to the democracy that we call the government of the United States of America, understanding it at its three basic levels. That everything that gets done, as it gets done at the federal level, the state level, hence we are here today, and at the local level, making sure that as we think about how things are dispersed and how the work is done, there is an interconnection. An interconnection that we have in the fights on Capitol Hill that I do every day. When I'm involved in making sure that the issues that the NAACP has passed, those issues that come up to us from locally, from right around here and every place throughout the state. Just so you know, the way our policies are set is that any member of the NAACP can actually submit through its units a resolution that will be considered by the national organization. What that means is that when we get together once a year, as we did last year in San Antonio, Texas, and as we will this year, we go to Detroit, Michigan, a little bit closer for you all right here, we know that we've heard from everybody about the issues and the challenges in their communities. And we're able to hear the voices of those in New York and those in Mississippi, those in Los Angeles and those in Miami, Florida, and every place in between, including we're still on military bases in Italy, Germany, Korea, and Japan as we've been involved in actually integrating our armed services. So we're hearing from all about the challenges there, and we're finding that they resonate everywhere. My folks in New York talk about things like racial profiling. We know that we see too often that racial profiling even happens here in the great state of Indiana. We know that when we're talking about issues of health care, we know that over 30% of African Americans prior to the Affordable Care Act had no health care insurance. And as we move forward, sadly, the leadership we have now at the national level sees the best thing to do is to repeal it. Well, we heard no discussion about what you're going to replace it with. When we live in the realities and the numbers, we're all about the data, you all. If we're going to be able to fix the problems, we need to know the data on what the problems are and make sure we're crafting our solutions consistent with that data that we're looking at. So when we're looking at healthcare, we knew that at the time that Barack Obama took office, we had 47 million Americans with no health care insurance. 30% of those were African American. Before we talk about the overall disproportionate number, they were actually children. We knew that as he was coming in, we had a president that had just vetoed the state children's health insurance programs bill that would have added 4 million children to our health care rolls. But we knew that that wasn't going to happen under that leadership, and so you did what you were supposed to do. You turned out in record numbers, not only here in the city of Indianapolis, but throughout the state of Indiana, to make sure that our voices were heard and we're able to see the beginnings of changes in America. We started seeing changes here in our leadership at the state level. We got a new governor, as the previous governor went to D.C. to work with the president. We ended up having new people coming in with a new drive and new priorities to make sure that all Americans were being addressed and no one was being left out. And because of that, we started seeing changes in Washington as well. We went from a new president coming in at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but let me just say a number of policy issues that we did not agree with. But we also saw what happened with the buildup of the American voter, and we saw the changes that began happening there as well. We started seeing that in our House and our Senate, as we look at our 435 voting members of the House and our 100 voting members of the Senate, the diversity was very much part of the landscape. We saw with those changes and with the turnout in the last election that we're now at the place where there's more diversity among leadership in the House. The woman who had become the first woman to serve as the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi from California, came back to serve again as a woman led the House of Representatives and leads it now. We started seeing that those who chaired committees, that were too often only male and one racial group, were now as diverse as America itself. We saw 5 standing committees now being chaired by African Americans and 28 subcommittees being chaired by African Americans as well. The election of more women from throughout the United States coming to Congress to change the landscape. Didn't they look great in their white as they sat on the floor during the State of the Union address? We saw that leadership was changing and things are changing along with it. So as we come out today, we recognize that how things work. The way it works when we pass any piece of legislation in Washington, D.C. That not only do the policies pass, but the appropriations are assessed. Let me tell you what I mean by that. The policies to make the changes in education, we were finally able to actually pass a reformation of our education policies in Washington, sending more money down here. We started seeing changes in our criminal justice system, and making sure the protections we needed were very much in place, and we started seeing the resources sent down here. We started seeing what was going on with healthcare and the changes there, and the need to make sure that as things opened up and more control was given to our state and local people, that we wanted to make sure as the resources came down that they're being distributed correctly. That's why we are here. When you think about what happens, if a block grant passes to pay for anything, it is the governor's office and the leadership here, the state legislature, that's going to make the difference. We have to be here, working with our friends that we elected to actually push our agenda forward to make sure they have the support they need. Because for everything that we ask for, there's someone that is working against it on the other side. For every issue that's raised and we know it's going to help things in our community, there's some that are so greedy that they would rather see those things made available to whatever programs they were doing before, not taking into consideration that Indiana is becoming more diverse than ever before. And with that diversity means a diversity in leadership, a diversity in understanding, a diversity in how we have to move together to make sure we become the best Indiana we possibly can. So that's why I'm delighted to be here as well, because there's something that's well in reach. It's an amazing thing when we cross party lines. We can see some agreement. It's a wonderful thing when we sit with a governor that happens to be with one party, and our members that overwhelmingly, but not exclusively, happen to be members of another political party. We recognize it again that the real face is not in party affiliation. Our party leadership, the real fix is in the agenda that we're able to get through, to watch out and advance the issues and concerns of every American and everyone from the Hoosier State. Give yourselves another big hand. So we're talking about today the issue of hate crimes and the need for the state of Indiana to move away from being one of the 4 exclusive states that do not have the push going on right here on the ground. We push to make sure, I talked to my coalition partners in Washington, D.C. I was talking with, on my way here, as a matter of fact, a good friend from the ADL. The ADL is one of the oldest Jewish organizations in the country. They're part of B'nai B'rith. And talk to them about us coming here to address this issue and try to move this bill through. And to share with me what they knew as well. There were those that were moving to actually limit its ability to move forward. There were those that were moving to cut the teeth out of the program so it becomes nothing but the name. But we've experienced that before too. We were moving to pass the anti-hate crimes bill in Washington, D.C. The James Byrd, Matthew Shepard, Local Law Enforcement Hate Crime Prevention Act. There were those that didn't want to say they opposed us doing anything to stop hate crimes. But what they did was introduce legislation with no teeth. They introduced legislation that said, in all account, and any action that it would do from that point on, simply that hate crimes were bad. Now, we don't need someone to legislate us saying that. The reason we came to provide policy and substance is because we know that. We know that even without the passing of some bill, that we can say hate crimes are bad. The real question is, once you've described it, once you've identified it, what you gonna do about it? So that's why we're here. I can tell you about a U.S. Senator from the state of Utah that didn't want to support real hate crimes legislation. But he didn't want to go back and tell his folks in the state of Utah that he opposed the bill. So he introduced a bill with no teeth. He introduced a bill that didn't have any infrastructure. He introduced a bill simply to say that he introduced a bill and try to provide some political cover for the reason he was not supporting something that would actually do something about it. Well, let me just say, much like your frustration, we were frustrated for years as well. But with that, and again, with that big vote that turned out in 2008, we were to change that as well. Because in 2008, we had a change in the presidency. We had a change in the leadership of the House. We had a change in the leadership of the Senate. And it didn't just happen because we wanted it to happen. It happened because we went out and knocked on doors. And we registered voters like never before. We made sure that the American voice was going to be heard on these issues. The people that were giving up on the process understood there was a new chance and a new opportunity. We pulled together our coalition partners from every end of the spectrum. Our friends that were coalition partners because of the issues. Our friends that were coalition partners because they represented constituencies that were very much like our own. Those who came, whether they came from the religious community, whether they came from our labor unions, whether they came from our women's organizations, whether they came from other groups and organizations representing the LGBTQ community. Regardless of where they came together because what we had was a convergence in interests. They understood what we understand. When hate mongers do what they do, they have no pre-existing relationship with us. They see you, they know what you represent in their minds, and they bring the dirtiest of deeds to address those concerns. Unlike most crimes are between people who know each other or live in the same community. When the police are investigating most crimes, they know who the problem was. They know when those communities do those dirty deeds. It's a different approach. The lesson we learned when we learned well, as a matter of fact, became crystallized in my mind when Matthew Shepard was killed in Casper, Wyoming. You all remember the Matthew Shepard case? A man who happened to be a member of the LGBTQ community. A man that was coming out of bar often frequented by members of that same community. A man that was lured into a car, taken out into a pasture area in Wyoming, who was beaten nearly to death and chained to a fence. A man that was left there to die, they finally found him 3 days later, and then he passed away. When we talked to the sheriff that investigated that case, he said when he started out, he thought there was no difference. A murder is a murder. An assault is an assault. Arson, whether they're burning a cross or burning somebody's house of worship, is just arson. He said, I thought it's the same issue. And we didn't need to talk about what was the manifest behind the crime until he was given the responsibility of actually investigating. What he learned then is a hate crime, quite frankly, is much more like organized crime. They don't choose their victims based on a pre-existing relationship or hatred. They choose their victims based on what they think who you are, how you look, what they believe you represent. When in the case of Matthew Shepard, what they realized then, as they began investigating, is it was a very expensive proposition. Expensive to the point that he had to lay off almost half of his deputy sheriffs. They couldn't afford to keep them on the payroll while they're investigating such an expensive case. We need that kind of support right here. We need to make sure that here in Indiana, we're not left alone that way. So we have the best protection that is proven to be effective. Now that's why it's my hope. As we're here today, that the governor will hear very loudly and very clearly that we've got his back. There's a movement to actually make sure hate crimes protection in place, that perhaps he's had the opportunity to speak to other governors in other states that have been struggled with the same issue. And I thought about what happened and think about who it is that gets affected. Some of you remember also the case of James Byrd. You remember James Byrd in Jasper, Texas? James Byrd, an African-American man, that had gone to a family get-together. He was walking home from that get-together, and as he was walking down the street, 3 members of a hate group saw him walking down the street. They had decided what they needed was to actually have someone they could show being beaten by them to get more people to join their organization. In other words, what they were looking for is a high-profile case. Someone that they could kill that would hit the news, someone that they would pull a number of symbolic issues involved in as well, someone that they pulled over on the side of the road and nearly beat to death, someone that chained to the back of a pickup truck that just so happened to have the old Dixie flag bumper sticker on the back as well. Someone that they saw that was African American that they believed as they drug his body down Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. leaving body parts sprawled all over the street. The message they would be sending to other hate mongers is, join us, and you can do this as well. Mr. Byrd did not know them. They did not know Mr. Byrd. That was beside the point. For them, it was targeting, it was doing what they did, killing them in the way they did, and the amount of resources it cost for us to be able to bring not only the support at the local level, but also because we passed through legislation to send more resources from the federal government into little Jasper, Texas, to be able to address those concerns as well. So brothers and sisters, we are here. We are here in the state legislature where those who want to make the decision should be able to hear from us and see us. We're here in the state legislature as they decided how they're going to vote. We want to make it clear that there are good reasons for what we're asking for, and we will remember. We will remember who you are and how you voted. We will share with your people back home, indeed very well, how you cast your vote and whether you did a job that's going to be helpful to all of us. We want to make sure that when we leave here, it is clear that we came for all the right reasons. And if you're confused, we're happy to sit down with you and explain why we've taken the position we have. We've gone through this for a very long time. We've gone through this for a very long time. So think about how on this day, the NAACP, as we think about the movement, celebrates 110 years of being on the front line to move a civil rights agenda forward. I'm very thoughtful that as we're here today, the lessons that we've learned and the things that we've come to understand. I want to make it very clear that we're God-loving, God-fearing people. Whatever our religious background, whatever our faith perspective, or whether we have one or not, very well happens to be. And within that, we want to make sure that we're bringing all that forward to bring the change that we need to America and to the state of Indiana to make sure everyone has the protections they deserve, the opportunities guaranteed by our Constitution, and a real choice as America moves into its next phase. So look, NAACP, I too am fired up and ready to go. I too see the importance of us moving from the various issues in our local communities where you come from all over the state, here to the state legislature, to make it clear that we too have ideas that will help make Indiana all that it needs to be and all that it has the promise to be as well. So as we go from door to door, from office to office, as we continue to hear from members of the legislature as they come through to speak with us and to talk with us, as we look at those that haven't quite made up their minds of what needs to be done, we can share with them our stories. We can let them know how we appreciate what's going on. We can show them what's been happening across the country, and most importantly, throughout the state of Indiana. And when it's all over and done, we can make sure that first, we pass the policies that need to be in place, and then secondly, we make sure those important policies become everything that the people of Indiana need. So I'm fired up and ready to go.